Welcome back to our podcast. Today we have Ellen, who's the director of Bantony Education, and Ellen has got a background in providing that sense of education that we're seeing for entrepreneurs as well as for those that are interested in the entrepreneurial spirit. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, James. Pleased to be with you.
Good stuff. So today we're in a world in which creativity and innovation are highly sought after skills, as well as adaptability. What we're seeing in the education realm is we're really looking for students or young people or people throughout their life who can adapt to different situations, who could come up with a creative and innovative solution. And I understand that you're focused on providing that. Can you start us off with a sense of what you're seeing out there? What is the call for action that we see out there in terms of creativity and innovation, adaptability? These concepts have been around for a while, but they're evolving over time. So what is it that you're seeing out there that we really need in today's environment?
I think that when we look into society right now, what we see most of all is constant change. And this is change in terms of the jobs that young people are going into, the jobs that young people will go into, the technologies they're using, the societal change around culture, community that's happening. And I think that what we need right now is more of a focus on the skills that young people, adults, can use to deal with that, to deal with that change, and also spot the opportunities within that change and see what they can bring to their lives, to perhaps within the employment setting, perhaps as a social change solution, as you mentioned, to some of the challenges we face, perhaps as a business venture. How can they build their skills so they're able to grasp opportunities and go out there and make them happen? In a world where change is constant, the future is uncertain, jobs may be disappearing, and our society is evolving around the world.
Some people, when they are in a change situation, they react in a positive way. They look at it as an opportunity or learning initiative. Others react in a negative way. They may be anxious. They may look at the uncertainty of the change, whether that change is needed, where's that change going to go, how are they going to change from where they are today and where it might end up. So if we look at this negative and this positive perspective, how do people deal with that? How can we structure our response in a way that we're looking at the positive, even though the change itself may give us anxiety of the uncertainty? And is this a skill that's applicable beyond just the workplace?
Absolutely. I think, we're talking about kind of adaptability, resilience, the ability to cope with uncertainty, to cope with ambiguity. And I think when you come to learning, to the school environment, perhaps, people say, oh, can you teach that skill? Can you help young people develop that skill? And the answer, what we're finding within the sort of the skills-based development that we're doing is, yes, you can. You can do that. You can familiarize young people with uncertainty. You can, in a school, you can put them in a situation where things are not fixed. Things are a bit fluid. Things might be uncertain around them. They might have to decide whether a risk is a risk worth taking. They might have to understand, take an informed decision on that risk. And as you put people into situations which are uncertain, which might cause difficult decisions to have to be made, might cause anxiety, they become familiar with that experience. And perhaps next time they're more able to deal with that situation, more able to take a measured decision in that situation. And in that familiarity, as you become more familiar with that kind of situation, it becomes less scary because you think, okay, I did this last time, I can cope with this time. So these are now skills that through our work, certainly, we're really looking to see and advise teachers, educators, workforce managers to say, well, this is where, you can insert, you can support the people you are working for you or you're working with, students, to help develop this mindset, this ability to be resilient and adaptable.
I imagine at the end of these sessions where people are interacting with uncertain situations, the goal is so that they have an understanding of risk, uncertainty, and how to navigate their way through, and they have confidence in their ability such that they believe that a solution can be found and they can work towards it. Does looking at individual situations, putting them in this situation and that situation, is that the approach to do, or does it give them familiarity with a unique situation which they can't translate into another situation? How do looking at a particular situation give them the ability to generalize into all similar situations which deal with risk and uncertainty?
I think it's about the emotional reaction to a situation. So you learn to then, it's self-efficacy is probably a word that we can bring in here. Self-efficacy is that thing where you understand your own abilities, your own strengths, your own weaknesses even. You know what you bring to a situation. So in terms of perhaps entrepreneurial activity, you know what you bring, and you are aware of other resources that others may bring. You might be more aware of that. And when it is that, when you're in a learning situation, there is always that emotional reaction to learning, particularly if it's challenging, if you're being taken outside your comfort zone, if someone is changing the goalposts within a particular learning environment or working environment where someone's changing the goalposts, then it makes things uncertain, it makes it a bit more scary, and your emotional reaction to that and how you then are supported to reflect back on that and learn from it is key. So in that way, you can familiarize yourself with those uncertain environments and extrapolate that experience in order to deal with different uncertainties.
When you talked about the goalposts, it brought to mind that the situations that you describe, are they in a sense a given fixed situation that here's the uncertainty, or are you actually divining situations such that they evolve over time? And that, because you talked about goalposts and moving goalposts, I'm wondering, in the situations that students or young people are involved in, does the situation itself change so that even if they think they have a solution, then there's new factors come into play? So are they learning about this, how situations in the real world actually evolve?
Definitely, perfectly put. It is about how situations in the real world evolve. I'm mainly talking about, education environments, so schools, colleges, universities, and, students being given a task, perhaps given a project or an activity that they need to realize. They might need to come up with ideas based on a theme in order to realize. And, the changing circumstances that may happen through that experience, which would ideally be very student-led, be very, sort of focusing on the learner, relying on the learner themselves to actually take action, take the initiative, make it happen. The changing circumstances, changing the goalposts can be created, perhaps, by the educator, by the professor, or it might be that it's just a natural thing that happens through that experience. I was in a workshop last week, and the facilitator of that workshop thought she'd booked a room downstairs because they didn't have something at the end of the day. And actually, when we went downstairs to go into that room to do the second part of the workshop room wasn't booked. Those and you can panic in that situation, or you can, use your skills to deal with it and cope with the uncertainty and find a solution. That's a very sort of small example. But again, it's about it's about creating situations, or those situations naturally occurring in a learning experience that is very real life relevant. Because in the real life, things don't go to plan. Whereas in our learning environment, often we learn on a subject and we are intended to succeed in that subject by doing a project which has a successful product, or doing an essay which has a successful written output. What we don't encourage perhaps is to be okay with failure, to be okay with to look at the process of learning rather than the product of learning, because the nuggets of gold of learning come through that process. That's where you have the uncertainty, you have the need to be creative, to find solutions to small problems, big problems, achieving a vision, or just getting yourself from A to B, and ultimately, out of your own efforts, out of your team's efforts, perhaps, to create that value, that entrepreneurial value for society, for community, for your employer, for your university, or for future business creation. So it's that process needs to be really real life relevant.
How do we then bring in the team dynamics? And there's at least two dimensions of team dynamics. One is the emotional interaction of the team members. Maybe the one person has gone through a training such that they're calm and they can understand the risk and the opportunities, but maybe the other team members still feel stressed and anxiety. So there's that emotional connection, as well as the task interaction and making sure everything is done. How in the training situations that you describe are the team dynamics brought in?
I think they're key to the learning experience, absolutely. How are they brought in? If you have a team approach, then you're going to, with any team, you're going to have the ability to support that team to understand their strengths and what they bring. You might do that through specific self-reflection on skills and self-efficacy. You can also have mentors. You can also have team observation, which can support reflection as that team goes along. But sometimes you want to see that team and how they function, because the learning for the individuals within their teams comes from the ability to experience the interaction that they go through, from experience the team dynamic, and then again sort of reflect back on it in a meaningful way with probably supported reflection, individually and as a team, in order to understand, well, why did that work? Why didn't that work? And how was it working in that team? What did we learn? That reflection is sort of the key part. Then there's different tools you can bring in during the process of working as a team in order to support the team dynamic. Although saying that, sometimes you just let them go.
Very cool.
Because you want to sort of if they fail, it's not we need to see that as a learning opportunity as well, because if a team doesn't manage to reach their anticipated destination, whatever that might be, they'll have learned a lot on the way.
Okay, cool. So now we've got this methodology or this approach in order to manage the emotions of both the individual and the team, and how to work through in a creative solution. Earlier you had mentioned recognizing opportunities. And if we have in real life or in a situation, how does one recognize an opportunity? How does one recognize that maybe the way something is structured could be structured differently, or challenge the assumptions that are inherent that people might have, their mindset or their bias? How do we give that ability for someone to cut through assumptions, mindsets, cut through structure that's been given to them, and be able to go and find a new path?
I'm taking a pause before answering that one. It's challenging, I think, to you want people to look. You give people the task to look around themselves, to look into society, to think about their community, to look at the business environment, to go out and talk to people, in order to generate the thought process that allow them to sort of say, oh, these are ideas, what are the opportunities within those, or to go out and sort of be sparked by the interactions they have, or things they read, or things they listen to and hear. It's, where do you find an opportunity? You never know. But the encouraging young people to have the chance to be actively supported, to go out there and have their imagination sparked, to be able to think creatively about what challenges society faces, what ideas do we have that we can come up with to sort of address some of those challenges potentially. And okay, are there opportunities that lie within that for us to do something? And it might be a small thing, it might be a big thing. One surfer, I believe, in the Netherlands, saw all the plastic in the ocean, and he was like 15, and 6 years later that's transformed into a globally recognized initiative to tackle the seas of plastic in the middle of our oceans. He saw a challenge and he spotted an opportunity, and he had the confidence to take that and go forward and really make a difference, bring people together, infuse people, mobilize a community to come behind him and work with him. On another topic, it might be something like recognizing that there is such a thing as period poverty. Young girls might not go to school because they don't have sanitary wear. Well, that's wrong. That's poverty that's invisible and toxic for that person's personal development. And it's not right, bringing visibility to that, a campaign, an activist. That's it's another example of someone saying that's wrong, it's spotting opportunity and going with it and mobilizing people behind that message. Equally, you can do that with a profit business idea. And look at the opportunities that lie within the economy to create something new, to change the way something is done, to bring people together, to do something together. There are so many things out there. And all of this within learning, it's very difficult for your average educator to think, well, how do we develop these skills, this mindset, these competencies in the young people that we're working with? And that's why, I'm based in Europe, I'm based in Belgium, and I come from the UK. A whole network of people led by the European Commission have developed a skills framework called Entrecomp in order to really identify what it means, what are we talking about when we say being entrepreneurial in these different settings, and what are the skills and mindset that are involved in that, and then to try and create this skills framework that we hope, that the European Commission hopes, that those supporting it hope will let people understand what are we talking about when we say supporting someone to be more entrepreneurial in life, work, self-employment. What are the skills and mindsets associated with that? How do you translate that into learning in a university, in a college? How do you support that kind of skills development in the workforce? How do you support people to get those skills? And what skills are we talking about? Well, it's many of the ones that we've spoken about already today. We look at sort of, there are, in this Entrecomp framework, 3 competence areas: ideas and opportunities, resources, and interaction. Ideas and opportunities, it's like it says on the tin. We're talking about vision, spotting opportunities, creativity, ethical and sustainable thinking around all of that. When you look at resources, it's about understanding and mobilizing your own resources, self-efficacy, and the resources of others around you. And that might be mobilizing others. It might be the financial literacy that you need. And then into action. Do something. If you don't try, you'll never know. You might fail, but you'll always learn. And that's taking the initiative, looking at working with others, planning and management, and then crucially, that learning from experience, reflecting back on what you've done, and then thinking, how would I do it differently next time? why did that go wrong? What can I change? How do I learn? And so the Entrecomp framework actually tries to create a structure for educators to understand how to implement this into learning in the classroom, in business, in corporates, multinationals, any kind of organization where learning occurs, and also for yourself. So, you can see what do these things break down to. So it's a very simple model. Beneath it is a lot of complexity, which supports educators to understand it, to see how to implement it, to actually maybe design new curriculum around it with learning outcomes, etc., supported through this framework. So that's a very important part of what we're using both in Europe and around the world. Many countries around the world are now using Entrecomp as a tool to, as I say, understand what we mean by being entrepreneurial and help them to translate that into education, into learning.
Sounds quite interesting. Do you have some takeaways for listeners?
I think when these kinds of skills are skills that will help any young person in life. If you ask an educator what they want, what kind of learner they want to support, to develop, it's creative, confident learners who are responsible citizens, part of society. And these are the skills that support young people to reach their potential, to understand themselves more, to spot the opportunities where they can be more entrepreneurial for themselves, for society, for their community, and for their own economic success. So my takeaway would be, think about skills. Think about these life skills that are entrepreneurial skills. You might call them 21st century skills. You put them into learning. How can you develop them in your workforce? How can you recognize them and value them? That would be my main takeaway. And obviously, if it's useful, take a look at Entrecomp.
Okay, thank you very much for that insight, and particularly some of those putting skill development into a methodology in which we can have measurable learning outcomes. Sounds really cool. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very pleased to be part.
That's the end of our podcast, and I want to thank everyone for listening. Thank you very much, and goodbye.